It was Christmas Day, 1986. Over 18 million people gathered around their televisions expecting laughter, warmth, and the lovable Trotters. Instead, they witnessed something that would haunt the show's creator until his final days. One episode, one disastrous night, and a beloved character transformed into someone so cruel that the man who created him demanded it never air again. What happened in that infamous episode changed the legacy of the sitcom forever. There was something almost magical about the first time you watched Only Fools and Horses. Maybe you remember sitting in your living room as a child, hearing that iconic theme tune float through the speakers. Maybe your parents were laughing at jokes you did not quite understand, but you laughed anyway because the warmth in that room was infectious. That was the power of this show. It did not just entertain you, it gathered you together. It made you feel like you belonged somewhere. Only Fools and Horses was never supposed to become a cultural phenomenon. When writer John Sullivan first pitched his idea about two working-class brothers hustling their way through life in Peckham, nobody expected it to become the most-watched sitcom in British television history. Yet something about the Trotters resonated with audiences in a way that transcended typical comedy. Del Boy, the charming and cunning older brother with dreams bigger than his market stall, became the heart and soul of the show. Played with irresistible charisma by David Jason, Del was the kind of character you could not help but root for. He was flawed, certainly. His schemes rarely worked out the way he planned. His grasp of French was laughably terrible. But beneath the dodgy deals and the flashy jewelry was a man who would do absolutely anything for his family. And then there was Rodney. Poor, innocent, eternally exasperated Rodney. Nicholas Lyndhurst brought such vulnerability to the younger Trotter brother that you wanted to reach through the screen and protect him. Where Del charged headfirst into disaster, Rodney stumbled reluctantly behind, always hoping for something better, but never quite finding it. John Sullivan understood something profound about comedy. He knew that the funniest moments come not from cruelty, but from recognition. When Del Boy fell through that bar counter, millions of viewers did not just laugh at him. They laughed because they had been there themselves in some way. They had tried to look cool and failed spectacularly. They had dreamed big and crashed hard. The Trotters were not characters to mock. They were family. Sullivan was fiercely protective of this dynamic. He carefully balanced every joke with moments of genuine emotion. When the comedy cut deep, it always came from a place of love. The brothers might argue, they might scheme against each other, but at the end of every episode there was an understanding. Family comes first, always. The show accumulated devoted viewers who quoted lines at work, imitated Del Boy's swagger at parties, and genuinely mourned when beloved characters faced hardship. When Granddad passed away in the series, the nation grieved alongside the Trotters. When Del finally became a millionaire, viewers celebrated as though they had won the lottery themselves. This was not passive entertainment. This was an emotional investment at the deepest level. Throughout the 1980s and into the early 1990s, Only Fools and Horses dominated British comedy. Awards piled up, ratings soared. The show became a genuine cultural institution, referenced in Parliament, quoted by celebrities, and treasured by generation after generation. Nothing, it seemed, could tarnish this perfect creation. Then came a surprising moment that made what happened next so devastating. Christmas specials were sacred ground for Only Fools and Horses. Year after year, the show delivered festive episodes that became appointment viewing for millions. Families would finish their Christmas dinner, settle into their sofas, and prepare to laugh. It was tradition. It was comfort. It was everything British television should be. So when a royal flush was announced for Christmas 1986, expectations were impossibly high. The premise seemed perfect. Rodney falls for a young aristocrat named Lady Victoria, the daughter of a duke. Del Boy, desperate to help his brother climb the social ladder, decides to guide him through the treacherous waters of upper-class society. Fish-out-of-water comedy at its finest. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. Absolutely everything. The problems began before the episode even aired. Unlike previous specials, a royal flush was completed only hours before broadcast. There was no time for the usual polish, no opportunity to fix what clearly was not working. Most significantly, the episode aired without the familiar studio audience laughter track that had accompanied every previous installment. Now you might think a missing laugh track is a minor technical issue. You would be wrong. That laughter was not just background noise, it was a guide. It told viewers when to laugh, when to relax, when to understand that what they were seeing was meant to be funny. Without it, something fundamental shifted in how audiences experienced the episode. Scenes that should have felt playful suddenly felt uncomfortable. Del Boy's usual banter with Rodney took on a sharper edge. What should have been brotherly teasing started to feel like genuine cruelty. And then came the dinner scene. Del Boy, trying to help Rodney impress Lady Victoria's family, instead humiliates him in front of everyone. The jokes are harsh, the delivery is mean. Rodney sits there mortified, and for the first time in the show's history, viewers did not know whether to laugh or cry. This was not the Del Boy they loved. This was someone else entirely. Later at the opera, things got worse. Del makes threats that were clearly intended as comic exaggeration. Without the laughter track to signal humor, they simply sounded aggressive. Viewers who had tuned in expecting warm Christmas entertainment instead found themselves watching something that felt almost unpleasant. The reaction was immediate and brutal. Fans who had loved the show for years expressed confusion and disappointment. Critics noted the harsh departure from the show's usual warmth. Even within the production team, there was acknowledgement that something had gone terribly wrong. Editor Chris Wadsworth would later describe A Royal Flush as quite a cruel, dark episode. Producer Richard Latto agreed that Del Boy's behavior was harsher than anything the character had shown before. The heart of the show had been replaced with something cold. You would be surprised to know how this episode revealed cracks behind the scenes and showed that even the most cherished series could face moments that challenge its own identity. John Sullivan was not a man who took failure lightly, especially when it came to Only Fools and Horses. This show was his baby. These characters were as real to him as any living person. So when A Royal Flush aired and the negative reactions poured in, Sullivan did something almost unheard of in television. He disowned the episode. Not publicly at first, but internally, Sullivan made clear that A Royal Flush represented everything he never wanted the show to become. Del Boy, the character he had crafted with such care, had been portrayed as genuinely mean-spirited. The warmth that defined the series had evaporated. Sullivan believed that filming on location, away from the energy of a studio audience, had made it harder for David Jason to find Del's usual charm. Whatever the reason, the damage was done. Sullivan made a decision. A Royal Flush would never air again in its original form, not while he had any say in the matter. For years, this became one of television's strangest situations. An episode watched by over 18 million people on Christmas Day simply vanished. It was not repeated. It was not discussed. When VHS and later DVD releases came along, the version included was dramatically different from what had originally aired. Nearly 18 minutes of footage were cut. New scenes were filmed and added. Most importantly, audience laughter was inserted throughout the episode, finally giving viewers the guidance they needed to understand when they should be laughing. These changes softened the darker edges and made A Royal Flush feel more like a traditional Only Fools and Horses episode. But Sullivan never forgot what had happened. 20 years after the original broadcast, he was still making adjustments, still trying to remove scenes where Del was nasty, still trying to repair damage he felt should never have occurred. Cast members who worked on the episode have since reflected that parts of A Royal Flush simply did not feel like the show they knew. Producer Ray Butt, who worked closely with Sullivan, agreed that certain lines had been crossed. The harsher Del Boy of the original cut was not the character audiences had fallen in love with. Something essential had been lost. and no amount of editing could fully restore it. Only recently, with the Blu-ray release, have both versions become available to fans. Now, for the first time, viewers can see exactly what Sullivan spent decades trying to hide. The original A Royal Flush stands as a cautionary tale about what happens when a beloved character is pushed too far. The emotional toll on Sullivan cannot be overstated. This was a man who had poured his heart into creating characters that meant everything to him. To watch Del Boy, his beloved creation, behave in ways that betrayed the character's fundamental nature was genuinely painful. Sullivan carried this burden for the rest of his life, never quite able to forgive himself for allowing it to happen. If A Royal Flush showed how internal creative decisions could damage a show, another episode would demonstrate how external events could transform innocent comedy into something troubling. The Sky's the Limit first aired in 1990 and became an instant favorite. The premise was classic Only Fools and Horses absurdity. The Trotters accidentally steal a satellite dish that turns out to be crucial to Gatwick Airport's radar system. Chaos ensues. Planes are diverted across Europe. Thousands of holidaymakers are stranded. Rodney, who had planned to meet Cassandra at the airport, discovers her flight has been rerouted to Manchester. The episode culminated in a brilliantly crafted scene where the family watches the evening news, slowly realizing the scale of the disaster they have caused. It was funny, chaotic, and perfectly in keeping with the show's tradition of small mistakes spiraling into enormous consequences. For over a decade, nobody thought twice about the episode. It was simply another beloved installment in a beloved series. Then came September 11th, 2001. After the terrorist attacks in America, broadcasters began viewing aviation-related comedy very differently. The scenes in The Sky's the Limit showing low-flying planes over Peckham and airport disruption suddenly carried unintended weight. What had once been harmless slapstick now echoed real-world tragedy in ways that made network executives uncomfortable. The episode was quietly pulled from circulation. No announcement was made. It simply stopped appearing in reruns. Fans who noticed its absence debated whether the decision was appropriate or excessive. Some appreciated the sensitivity, understanding that certain images could trigger painful memories for viewers. Others argued that the show's comedy should not be held responsible for events its creators could never have anticipated. John Sullivan himself had drawn inspiration for the airport subplot from his own frustrating travel experiences. There was nothing sinister in the writing, nothing that anticipated how the world would change. Yet the visual overlap with real tragedy transformed how audiences perceived the episode. This incident marked a turning point for Only Fools and Horses. The show was no longer just entertainment. It was now subject to forces entirely beyond its creators' control. Classic episodes that had brought joy to millions could suddenly become controversial for reasons that had nothing to do with their original intent. As streaming platforms brought Only Fools and Horses to new generations, another controversy emerged. As Only Fools and Horses continued to reach new audiences, certain episodes began to receive special warnings about their content. Episodes like The Russians Are Coming, The Yellow Peril, and Who's a Pretty Boy now carried disclaimers before they play. Even the beloved 1985 Christmas special To Hull and Back included a message noting that some behaviors and jokes may be considered offensive today. These warnings were intended to provide context, helping modern viewers understand that the show was created in a different era with different social norms. The reaction from longtime fans was volcanic. Social media exploded with complaints about woke interference with a beloved classic. Fans argued that these warnings were unnecessary, condescending, and fundamentally misunderstanding the nature of the show's humor. They pointed out that John Sullivan had never intended to cause harm. The jokes were products of their time, reflecting attitudes that were common in 1980s Britain. Critics and media commentators offered a different perspective. They argued that the warnings serve an important purpose, particularly for younger viewers or those unfamiliar with the cultural context of the era. Rather than censoring content, the disclaimers simply provide information. Viewers can make their own decisions about what they watch, armed with an understanding of when and why the content was created. The debate revealed deeper tensions about how society handles its cultural past. Should older shows be presented exactly as they originally aired, trusting audiences to recognize historical context? Or do modern platforms have a responsibility to acknowledge that some content may be problematic? Broadcast channels like UK Gold and streaming platforms like ITVX adopted these warnings, making them visible before certain episodes. While the networks aim to respect both historical context and modern sensibilities, the move amplified tensions among viewers. Some saw the warnings as thoughtful guidance. Others felt they were overreactions that undermined the original spirit of the series. Sue Holderness, who played Marlene throughout the show's run, has spoken publicly about these debates. She emphasizes that comedy has always relied on pushing boundaries and testing social norms. In her view, modern audiences sometimes misunderstand the original purpose of jokes, interpreting playful satire as genuine malice. She argues that understanding the context of 1980s Britain is essential to appreciating what the show was trying to achieve. While modern audiences debated language, legacy, and cultural sensitivity, fan communities and archivists quietly explored the show's past. Lost scenes and forgotten scripts began to resurface, offering fresh insights and sometimes challenging familiar narratives. Only Fools and Horses officially came to an end in 2003, bringing a close to one of Britain's most loved sitcoms. The final episode of Only Fools and Horses, titled Sleepless in Peckham, aired on Christmas Day and was designed as a true farewell to the Trotter family. The story centered on Del Boy and Rodney finally discovering that they were millionaires after a long legal dispute over their late mother's estate. For years, the brothers had chased the dream of becoming rich, and this ending fulfilled that promise in an emotional and unexpected way. Del finally achieved the success he always believed was just one deal away, while Rodney secured financial stability for his family, bringing their long journey full circle. The episode struck a deeply emotional tone, balancing humor with closure. One of the most powerful moments came when Del and Rodney walked away from Nelson Mandela House for the last time, silently acknowledging the life they were leaving behind. The final scene showed Del returning to the empty flat, gently placing the Trotters Independent Traders sign on the floor before turning off the light. This quiet ending resonated strongly with audiences, drawing millions of viewers and marking a dignified goodbye to a show that had defined British comedy for over 20 years. Beyond the episodes that aired on television, Only Fools and Horses has a rich collection of deleted scenes, unused scripts, and alternate takes. Reddit forums and fan communities have become treasure troves of rediscovered material. Some of these cuts were minor, simple jokes removed for timing. Others were more significant, scenes trimmed due to sensitivity concerns or to maintain episode pacing. Even lighthearted moments like certain hospital bed conversations featuring Del Boy were removed from television versions to align with changing audience expectations. What makes these discoveries so compelling is how they reshape understanding of the Trotters and their world. Alternate takes sometimes show Del Boy reacting in ways that are softer or more playful than in the final broadcast. These versions remind viewers why the character became so beloved in the first place. His warmth shines through in moments that editors ultimately cut. Rediscovered scripts reveal storylines that were planned but never filmed, character arcs that were abandoned, jokes that Sullivan decided went too far. Each discovery adds another layer to understanding the creative process behind one of Britain's greatest sitcoms. The archival work also fuels ongoing debates about tone and humor. Even small cuts can provoke passionate discussion among fans. Should these deleted scenes be restored? Did the editors make the right choices? What would the show have been like if different decisions had been made? These questions have no easy answers, but the fact that fans are still asking them still searching for lost footage, still debating creative decisions made decades ago, speaks to the enduring power of Only Fools and Horses. The dedication of these fan archivists deserves recognition. They have preserved a cultural heritage that might otherwise have been forgotten. They have challenged official narratives about what the show was and what it could have been. Their work ensures that future generations will understand Only Fools and Horses not just as a finished product, but as an evolving creative endeavor with its own complicated history. Only Fools and Horses occupies a unique position in British cultural memory. It is simultaneously beloved and controversial, nostalgic and problematic, timeless and very much of its era. The show that brought families together around their television sets is now a lens through which we examine how society has changed. Perhaps the magic has become more complicated. Watching Only Fools and Horses today means engaging with questions that earlier audiences never had to consider. It means understanding context, recognizing that humor exists within a social framework that shifts over time, accepting that something can be both a beloved classic and a product of its era. John Sullivan passed away in 2011, leaving behind a legacy that continues to generate discussion and debate. He spent his final years still adjusting a royal flush, still trying to perfect what he saw as a flawed episode. That dedication speaks to how seriously he took his responsibility to the characters he created. The Trotters themselves remain immortal in their way. Del Boy still schemes. Rodney still worries. Uncle Albert still tells rambling stories about the war. In the eternal present of television reruns, they will always be hustling, always be dreaming, always be family. What has changed is how we watch them, and perhaps that change was inevitable. Every generation rediscovers classics through its own lens. Every era brings its own questions. The controversy surrounding Only Fools and Horses is not a sign that the show has lost its value. It is proof that the show still matters enough to argue about. So there you have it. The hidden controversies, the lost scenes, the episode that haunted its creator for decades. Only Fools and Horses gave us some of the greatest moments in television history, but it also faced challenges that nearly destroyed what made it special. What do you think about these revelations? Does knowing this history change how you see the show? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and share your favorite Only Fools and Horses memories. After all, this time next year we could be millionaires.